Welcome to Karma's Harvest. Today, we explore a story of corporate greed that backfired in the most spectacular way. Possible a reminder that when you plant seeds of deception, the harvest will eventually demand its due. In the high-stakes world of Silicon Valley, Nexus Stream was the golden child. Their growth charts didn't just climb, they defied gravity. At the heart of this success was Julian Vane, a CEO who spoke of disrupting the ecosystem while wearing $3,000 suits. But behind the glass walls of their headquarters, a quiet data analyst named Mark started noticing something strange. Mark's job was to optimize user engagement. But as he dug into the gold list, the company's most valuable client database, the numbers didn't add up. These high-value clients were incredibly active at 3 a.m. on Tuesday mornings. They never complained. They never asked for refunds. And most importantly, their IP addresses all traced back to a series of obscure server farms in Eastern Europe. And strangely, a private basement in the company's own building. Mark realized the truth: Nexus Stream wasn't growing, it was inflating. They were manufacturing their own success, using thousands of sophisticated bots to lure in real investors. When Mark brought these concerns to Julian, he wasn't met with gratitude. He was met with a cold stare and a non-disclosure agreement. Mark refused to sign. He resigned the next day, taking nothing but his personal belongings. But Julian Vane couldn't let a loose end dangle. He decided to crush Mark before Mark could speak. 2 weeks later, Mark was served with a lawsuit. Nexus Stream was suing him for $10 million, alleging that he had stolen the gold list, the company's most sacred trade secret. The legal battle was framed as David versus Goliath. Julian wanted to make an example of Mark. He wanted the world to see what happens when a disgruntled employee tries to sabotage a titan. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with journalists and nervous investors. Julian sat at the plaintiff's table, looking every bit the victim of intellectual property theft. His high-priced lawyers stood up, painting Mark as a corporate spy who had stripped the company of its most valuable asset, its client list. Then it was Mark's turn. He didn't look like a spy. He looked like a man who had found peace in the truth. His lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, we admit that my client has a copy of the list. In fact, we'd like to submit the entire gold list into evidence today." Julian smirked. He thought he had won. He thought Mark was confessing. "However," the lawyer continued, "we are also submitting a secondary report. We hired an independent forensic cybersecurity firm to verify the identities of these 10,000 premium clients my client is accused of stealing." The courtroom went silent. Mark's lawyer pulled up a digital map on the screen. Every single client on this list, which the plaintiff claims is worth $10 million, shares a singular characteristic. They don't exist. We have tracked the digital heartbeat of these accounts directly back to a script, written and hosted on Nexus Stream's internal servers. "Mr. Vane isn't suing my client for stealing customers. He's suing him for holding a mirror up to a ghost." The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the data. The stolen list was nothing more than a ledger of fraud. Mark hadn't stolen a client list, he had preserved evidence of a felony. But the story doesn't end there. In the back of the courtroom, 3 men in dark suits stood up. They weren't journalists. They were agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. They had been watching the proceedings with great interest. Because if the clients were fake, the company's valuation was a lie, and every dollar taken from investors was a federal crime. Julian Vane's face went from smug to ghostly pale. The hunter had become the prey. The very lawsuit he filed to bury Mark became the shovel that dug his own grave. By claiming the list was valuable property in a court of law, he had legally admitted to the existence of the fake accounts he had used to defraud the public. The judge dismissed the case against Mark with prejudice. As Mark walked out of the courtroom, he didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Behind him, the SEC agents were already placing Julian Vane. under arrest for securities fraud and money laundering. Nexus stream collapsed within 48 hours. The gold list was deleted, the servers were seized, and Julian swapped his designer suits for a state-issued jumpsuit. Mark went back to his life, eventually starting a small consultancy built on one simple principle: transparency. He learned that in the end, you don't have to fight the shadows. You just have to bring the light. This has been Karma's Harvest. Remember, the truth doesn't need a lawyer, it only needs time. Until next time, keep your seeds honest and your harvest will be plenty.